Hey friends, welcome to another week of the JOANNA WHALEY podcast. I'm so happy that you are here. We're going to touch on something really challenging that I'm working through personally. So thanks for being here, a part of this conversation. But if you're somebody who is LGBTQ or you're a parent of a queer kid and you have been told by your church that you cannot have access to your faith anymore because of who you love or how you identify or how your kid identifies, I want you to know that that's BS. And right now you can go to patreon.com/JOANNA WHALEY. And for as little as $1 a month, I can be a spiritual resource for you or your loved one. That's patreon.com/JOANNA WHALEY. On the other side of the music, we're going to be talking about pastors and their predatory behaviors and how it's misguided against LGBTQ people. Let's dive in. Alrighty, friends, welcome. Welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. I'm your host. I mean, obviously it's in the title of the podcast, but for those watching live, I'm JOANNA WHALEY. I'm a former evangelical pastor. I was a pastor for 20 years in the evangelical church. Big mega churches, lights and smoke and lions, tigers and bears, oh my, the whole show. Every weekend looked like a Taylor Swift concert. That was the level of church I did. In these environments, I was told over and over and over as a pastor, like that we believed in the purity of human beings. We believed in pure, sexual ethic and things like that. That was kind of the narrative in our evangelical churches. And to save you, I definitely encourage you to go listen to a lot of my show. I do talk about a lot about some of my story, but today I'm going to really detail some things that I don't I've tried to stray away from lately on my show. I want to bring you through some experiences I had as a closeted transgender woman in the evangelical church. I was an evangelical megachurch pastor, and I was a closeted trans person. And I want to go through some of the things that I went through as a pastor in that time, because there was a lot of fear thrown at me as a trans person and rhetoric thrown at me about who I was and what my gender represented to people. That was really, really unfair and really just false information. And the reason I want to talk about this today, for those that, I have an audience, a local audience from in the area that I live. Many of the mega churches I worked at, I do have people who listen and interact with my show who I pastored at one time or worked in their churches. I'm happy you're listening today. But for my broader audience who you've never been in a church with me in the past, the church that fired me, I'll use big air quotes, asked me to resign for being trans. Sent out an email last night and I'm still on this email, it's hard. It's like I never engaged with them to have my name removed. So I got an email last night. And the contents of this email it shook me to the core. And I'm going to read it to you. Now, know that the couple of years I worked at this church, I had some really great friends who were pastors, and the person who is the subject of this email was a great friend of mine and continued to be a friend of mine after I worked there. I'm going to read it to you. And I'm going to give you the church's name because it's public knowledge now. I worked for a church called 242 Community Church in the Detroit, in Southeast Michigan area. Campuses all over, big, huge church, multiple locations. And I'm going to read you this email really quick. Here it is. It is with the heaviest hearts that we must share some very disturbing news. Yesterday, September 13th, a staff member here at 242 Community Church discovered a hidden video camera located inside a unisex bathroom in the backstage area of our Brighton campus. Will Johnson, our former worship pastor director, confessed that he placed it there and was immediately terminated. Church leadership quickly notified the Livingston County Sheriff's Office, who arrested Will Johnson last night. At this time, we are not aware of the full scope of this crime, and we are fully cooperating with the ongoing investigation. We are shocked and deeply saddened by this situation, as the protection, safety, and privacy of every person who enters our church is a priority. Our commitment to you is to be fully transparent and care for all victims of this crime. And it goes on, and it details some things they're going to do with, within the church and all this. I read this, and I'm just going to be honest with you, get really, really angry. Because when I was in the closet and I was questioning my gender identity, I heard a lot of things from people in the congregation. Heard a lot of things about my transness and saying that, I remember in my firing process, I was no longer, you're welcome to come back to the church. This is some of the things that happened in my HR, but and you're welcome to serve in the church, but you can't serve in kids. You can't be in leadership anymore. Why? Because it's perceived that if you're queer, that you're some sort of deviant, that you're some sort of predator, right? This is a very normal narrative that happens within many of religious circles, is that if you are queer, if you're transgender, you are somehow a deviant and you're some kind of predator. And it is a pervasive narrative that is going on within the church today. That someone like me, who is a trans person, is viewed as someone who is equal to someone who does something like this. And there was so much fear in people. And you're wondering, I'm just being dramatic. I would refer you to the hundreds and hundreds of messages that I got on a daily basis from people in my church saying how disappointed they were in me and how afraid they were for those around me, saying that that the trans community better not come in our bathrooms. All the while, a straight pastor who was my friend was putting cameras in the bathrooms, of which I had used. So this fear that is out there in the church right now about queer people is totally misguided. Completely and utterly misguided. The people we need to be leery of, the people we have to have our eye on the most, are the straight pastors. You think I'm being dramatic? Listen to this clip. Listen to this clip I'm going to play for you. This is from a trans creator. Her name is Kristen B. And she, for years, started to count, and she monitored the news of who was making news for SA every single week. And I want you to take a listen to this and ask me if queer people are the problem. Ask me if queer people are the problem. Take a listen.
Should we start with the South Carolina Baptist Church volunteer who pleaded guilty to 4 felony counts of sexual conduct with a child and still isn't going to jail? His sentence was suspended. Or should we start with the ex-gay conversion therapist who turned over his license to practice because it turns out not only does he still like men, he was accused of abusing patients? Now, we can't start with drag queens or transgender people because in week 55 of Who's Making News for Sexual Abuse of Children, not a single drag queen and not a single transgender person has made the list. But there are 256 others, including 3 evangelical pastors, 2 Catholic priests, 2 Mormon leaders, that's 1 leader and an ex-missionary, and 6 other church employees. A total of 13 new names who are people in the religion industry. And there were 2 more politicians, 1 Republican, 1 nonpartisan, all added in as our total jumps to 8,239. For the not quite 13 months, we are looking at 646 in the religion industry, 1 drag queen, 4 transgender people, and 72 politicians. 75% of them almost Republicans.
So tell me that queer people are the problem. Tell me this. Because the statistics clearly show that those that are committing crimes of this nature, people that are committing these crimes of this nature, are absolutely the evangelical pastors. It's not the queer people. However, my phone blew up for months and months and months, and I intercepted text messages saying, "Can I be trusted around kids?" Just because I'm trans. This is the reality that when, and Milestone says, "Thank you for speaking out." You're welcome. This has to be said. It just has to be said. I'm so tired of being told that who I am and what I wear is immoral, when it's the pastors of the churches who are committing crimes. Crimes by the dozens, by the thousands. That report we just heard, in just 13 months of what her reporting found, was like 600, almost 700 pastors and only 4 trans people. And we're worried about queer people leading in our church. We should be worried about the straight people leading in our churches. Now, that could be a whole argument, right? Of why you should let queer people lead in the church. Right? But this is a huge problem. What are your thoughts, friends? If you're watching on TikTok, feel free to join in. Hit the request to join button. Be over 18. Be respectful. If you're watching on Facebook, throw a comment in. I would love to interact with you. I threw out my script today. I was going to talk about the debate, and this whole thing blew up in my email this week, just about this pastor who's a friend of mine, who I've had so many interactions with, and I'm at a loss. But what's so confusing to me as a queer person, people had these feelings about me when I transitioned. That somehow my gender identity was just as bad as this. I'm at a loss here. Give me your thoughts, friends. But this is not a new thing. Pastors abusing people is not a new thing. A really huge church recently made the news. Gateway Church in Texas, with Pastor Robert Morris, made the news for something he did. And I know people who work at Gateway. I know several pastors who work at this church. And it's always the ones you think are the most pure and holy. Let's take a listen to this report from NBC.
For decades, Cindy Clemishire carried anger and shame as she watched the meteoric rise of megachurch pastor Robert Morris.
Thank you, Jesus, for
watching him has been harder and harder.
Morris founded Gateway Church in 2000.
If you don't tell the whole truth, you're not being honest.
One of the largest evangelical congregations in the nation, with 9 campuses in North Texas and tens of thousands of devoted worshipers. He became a member of President Donald Trump's Spiritual Advisory Council. But to Cindy, Morris was the traveling evangelist who began to sexually abuse her on Christmas Day, 1982.
He told me, he said, "Hey, come in my room before you go to bed tonight. I want to talk to you."
He was 21, Cindy was 12.
He started by touching my breast and putting his hands in my pants. He wanted me to stand and close my eyes so he could lift my shirt and pull my pants down and just look at me as a 12-year-old.
Do you remember what he would say to you, what he'd tell you?
Well, the very first time he told me, "You can't tell anyone because it will ruin everything."
She says the abuse lasted 4 years until she told her family what was happening. In 2005, after years of struggling, Cindy reached out to Morris and suggested that he pay her restitution.
No one can give me back my teenage years.
It was just last month that for the first time she shared her story publicly online. Morris had been sharing his version for years.
Sexual temptation is an appetite of the flesh, and I developed an appetite before I was saved.
As he rose in influence and power at Gateway, Morris sometimes alluded to past transgressions.
I was very immoral, and I was immoral a lot.
In June, Morris told the Christian Post he had inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady and resigned from Gateway. Gateway told NBC News it is committed to protecting people, first and foremost children, and that it has retained a law firm to conduct an investigation. Gateway says before last month, the current elders did not have all the facts. Former Gateway pastor Stephen LeBlanc says parts of Robert Morris's past were known for years. He just didn't know Cindy's exact age.
It wasn't cloaked at all. It was a common knowledge. And in a way, somehow celebrated that God had disciplined a man and restored him.
Even now, he worries former colleagues aren't being honest about what they knew.
I can't think of any accountability that they've taken other than to plead ignorant.
And you don't buy it?
No.
Other incidents bring the culture of the church into question. Court documents show earlier this year, Gateway Church settled a lawsuit brought in 2020 by the mother of a minor who alleged she was sexually assaulted by another member and that Gateway leaders concealed and discredited evidence. The church did not admit to any liability.
They don't look at a child as someone to protect. Let's use the child in any way we have to protect ourselves.
In letters from 2007 reviewed by NBC News, Robert Morris's attorneys blamed Cindy, claiming she initiated inappropriate behavior. Cindy and her attorneys say that same year, Robert Morris asked her to sign an NDA in exchange for $25,000. She refused. Morris did not respond to multiple interview requests. While Gateway's review is underway, 4 church officials have taken a leave of absence from the Board of Elders.
So, here we are. Yeah. Nathan says, holy shit. Yeah, for real. This is the reality we're living in. While simultaneously calling queer people deviants and predators, it's the pastors who 99 times out of 100 are the culprits. And this stuff Just everybody goes, oh yeah, of course. And Zora says it's both. It isn't. It isn't both. Queer people they're not doing these things in the church. In all of the work that I do, in all of the people that I interact with, and the hundreds of people that I have emails and messages with and Zoom calls with about their church stories and their church hurt, I have never once heard of a queer person. I have never heard a pastor tell me that a queer person did something immoral or illegal in their church. But I have heard over and over and over again that the pastor is the perpetrator. So tell me that the fear is pointed in the right place. It isn't. It just isn't. What are your thoughts, friends? Join in the conversation. Leave a comment if you're on Facebook or TikTok. Or if you're TikTok, you can chime in. Join, hit the request to join, be over 18, and be respectful. I do watch and look and see if your profile seems legit. I won't admit you if you don't look legit, because we've had some interactions, if you will, on this show. Yeah, Nathan says, yeah, but pastors have been the absolute biggest perpetrators. And let's see, Oregon says, you're not being respectful of God. Well, how is it respectful of God to, first time I've ever sneezed on the air. First time that's ever happened. How is it not being respectful of God? How is it being respectful of God if you're the pastor of the church and you're putting cameras in bathrooms? Which, if you're just joining us, that's what started this whole podcast episode. A church that I worked for just fired a pastor whom I was friends with. Just fired him, and now he's gone to jail over putting cameras in bathrooms. Tell me how that is respectful to God. I just have a hard time with this whole queer people are the problem narrative. Let me give you a little background on what my experience has been as a queer person. When I was in the closet, I perceived that I had a lot of what you would call, evangelical speak, sexual temptation in my life. The reality is that it was my female self trying to come out, is what I was perceiving as wrong. But the reality that comes with queer people post-transition or post-coming out is actually we don't have anything to hide anymore. And many of us we live normal lives. And we don't have to live with secrets anymore. Now people have secrets, they have their things. But for me, in my story, those things that I was most ashamed of and I thought were so wrong about me, it's just public knowledge. It was my female self. Please tell me how feeling like a female is such a predatory act. Please tell me how, if I'm having a love for someone of the same gender, and it's a mutual love between two consenting adults, please tell me, how is that immoral? Noxious says, LOL, you're literally ignoring facts. And I don't understand this, because the facts is that pastors are committing these crimes. Straight pastors. Otis says, I'm Catholic born and raised, but I don't trust priests and I love God. You do not need a priest for God. There you go. I agree. And people get mad at me for that. They're going to send me their emails. They're going to send me their messages. I'm going to get the hate mail. It's going to bounce all to the circle file, if you will. But the reality is that I think that clergy is getting more and more untrustworthy as time goes on. The world is moving, and these are the things. I scrolled through the comment section on this church I used to work for. I scrolled through the comment section, and so many people saying, I will never go to a church again because of this. Do I know other reasons people don't show up in churches is because of how they treat queer people? Because queer people are treated with the same disdain as someone who puts a camera in a bathroom. When literally all we want to do, oh, Joshua, hello, I love you too. Oh, everyone needs to go follow the original Sinfluencer on TikTok. Amazing person. One of the best people I've ever known. But I have such a hard time with you saying that because of who I am is equal to someone who's literally getting their rocks off by looking at someone taking a shit. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. I have this little note here next to my camera, next to my microphone. I'm breaking my rules on my podcast today. If you watch my show lately, I've been trying to clean up my act a little bit. I've been trying to be more like broad, like trying to be a broad here. I'm trying to like clean up my language. It says host like you're live on public radio. That's what it says. But today I needed to, I just needed to say what I needed to say. Joshua says, I just said the same thing to Prez, his wife. Yes. How on earth is my gender identity equal to being a sexual predator? The numbers do not back up that narrative. Over and over and over again. Just like this pastor in New Hampshire. Take a listen.
New Hampshire pastor is accused of strangulation and sexual assault and is also being investigated for the same crimes in Florida. Good afternoon. I'm Jean Mackin. Ossipee police say at the time of the crimes, Kevin Strawn was the head minister of Agape Ministries Church in Ossipee and Moultonborough. They say the victims in this case are people he knew, including children. Strawn has been indicted on several charges. Police are asking anyone with information about this case to call them.
So that's not a unique thing. This crap is happening every day. But you want to know the only place you're finding anti-trans narratives? I'll tell you. It starts with an F and it ends with an X. News. Fox News. Fox News. Literally the only place that they're talking about stuff like this. And they think that migrants are eating cats and dogs and pets. Okay? How can you trust this stuff? How on earth can you trust any of this stuff? It's just really annoying. Funny thing is recently I started leading worship again at a church that I've been a part of for a while. Yes, I'm a trans woman and I sing in a church. And this morning I just had a really hard time engaging with church because I was just pissed off. I was just mad. Just so angry with this misguided fear against queer people when it's usually always the pastor. It's annoying. If you're watching live, don't go anywhere. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. On the other side of the commercial, we're going to keep this conversation going. You can be part of the conversation. Hit request to join. Be over 18. Be respectful. And leave a comment. And I'll get back with you as soon as possible. We'll be right back after this short commercial.